Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of the syndicated talk show, People of Distinction. The talk gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, 𝘍𝘪𝘳𝘓𝘍𝘪𝘳𝘐𝑚 today for more info, or you can always email me directly through Benji at 𝘍𝘪𝘳𝘓𝘍𝘪𝘳𝘬. And on the line with us today, we have the impressive F.W. Kirkpatrick. We're going to be discussing his amazing memoir, Why Didn't I Die? A memoir of PTSD. It's available for purchase through Amazon as well as 𝘠ₛ𝑎noble.com, pretty much all the regular online book resellers. But people also check out his personal site, whydidn'tidie.com. There you're going to find more information on Fred himself, more information on this amazing book, as well as find hyperlinks set up to take you to the purchasing pages. And you're going to want to check back in frequently because not only is this the book that we're discussing today, and this is really the main one that we're focusing on, but Fred has another one on the horizon. Now, I say on the horizon because it's not available for purchase just yet. That one is called My Great Aunts. You're going to want to check back in frequently to get that book the moment it becomes available. It's sure to be a treat. One more time, that's whydidn'tidie.com. Head on over there today and gather everything that Fred has in store. And before we go any further, I want to take this opportunity and point out that Fred was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by one of the best advertising firms in the business and people you already know. I'm talking about Studio of Books. So for my writers out there who have gone through their process creating their masterpiece and now you need help moving the book you just developed. If that's you, give yourself the best gift you can give. Contact Studio of Books by heading to studioofbooks.org. I'm telling you, they're one of the best in the business to do it, and this is exactly what they specialize in. So once again, that's studioofbooks.org. Head on over there today and gather all the ways that their fantastic team is going to help you do just that. And listen, I mentioned it before, Fred is a name to be reckoned with. He is a force. He is someone to be acknowledged, an absolute embodiment of a person of distinction. Right there in the title of his book, people, there's no beating around the bush, okay? Really, in that subtitle, you understand the conversation at hand. Now, Fred is an ex-military member, and his memoir is all about his PTSD. It's all about his time in the military. Specifically to the Vietnam War and the PTSD that he came back to this country with. And the reason why I'm so much looking forward to this discussion, because first and foremost, this is a book that is going to resonate with millions upon millions of people out there. Millions of people that also find themselves dealing with PTSD, but millions of people that don't. Because for the people that don't have PTSD and maybe don't have any military representatives in their close circle, this is going to give you a direct insight of war, but also the harrowing depictions of what happens and the circumstances around being involved in it. PTSD is a real thing that affects millions of people. But for those that have not gone to war, I think a lot of times it's either A, you're very quick to cast aspersions and to judge those that have gone to war. And listen, I've been one and I've been very vocal on the record of saying I personally do not believe in war. Now I understand that if you look at the history of humanity, this just seems to be something that human beings have always done. And we can go through and talk about the pros and cons. And I, again, have always been one that vastly believes the cons immensely outweigh the pros. But it's a discussion to be had. It's not a discussion we're having here today. But what I think this book represents is not only giving you that insight, but offering you an opportunity to really be more empathetic and compassionate towards those that have PTSD from their time in the military. This is a wonderful depiction of some of the things that don't get talked about enough. At the end of the day, Fred is the expert, man. It's his book. He's written it. It's his life. He's lived it. But sit back and strap in because, people, this is going to be a discussion that is going to make you run and purchase the book upon conclusion. Because I promise you, we're only scratching the surface here today. We're not going to cover it all. But you're going to understand why this is a book you need to add to your shelf. First and foremost, Fred, welcome to People of Distinction. And thank you truly for being a guest. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing okay, and how are you, sir?
I'm wonderful, Fred. I'm a bit better than I deserve, and I appreciate you for being here with us to discuss this magnificent book, because I know, man, this is, as someone who is very familiar with the military, and I know a lot of representatives of the military, this is something that I know a lot of times we sweep under the rug, especially as men, right? Men a lot of times don't talk about their feelings. They don't talk about the things that are happening to them internally. So this is something that I think is going to be a bridge for so many people. So thank you for writing the book. Thank you for being here to discuss it. Fred, we oftentimes like to start off by learning a little bit more about our representatives before jumping into the book. But listen, this is a memoir, man, so we're going to learn about you while we learn about the book. So let's jump right in. Why Didn't I Die? A memoir of PTSD. Tell us a little bit more about your book.
Well, I mean, it was quite a process that came about how I got into writing this book. After Vietnam, I spent about 25 years not thinking about Vietnam and a battle I missed that just changed my whole entire life. Mm-hmm. But it was a series of events from 1986 to 2005 that changed my life and got me focused on trying to do some good for others that were suffering more than I was. And I just want to go through a few of those things. In September of 1986, I saw an ad in a veterans magazine from a mother asking if anyone knew her son, Jackie Boland, who was killed on October 17th, 1961, in this battle that I missed.
Wow.
I wrote to her, and I eventually talked with not the mother, but the daughter, because the mother was still so distraught. 20 years later, she could not talk about her son.
Yeah.
I didn't remember Jackie, and there's a lot of reasons why that are somewhat explained in the book, but I contacted the family and found two people that knew Jackie, and I guess that helped the family a lot. I didn't think about it anymore until maybe 6 or 7 years later. I got a call on a Saturday, and it was Jackie's mother, Betty Boland, calling me, and she talked to me for over an hour about her Jackie, and she just, I wanted to cry. It just got to me that I thought, I'm doing some good. So then I got a letter afterwards, maybe 2 years later, from Mike Dinkins, and he had been in the company and he had monitored the radio while this battle was going on, and it traumatized him so deeply. And here he was working on a college project about the battle and wanted to find as many people that were involved in trying to understand what happened. Well, and I got deeply involved in that, and that started me on my journey. October of 1989, I wrote to President George Bush Sr. asking for a national holiday for the Vietnam veterans, because I thought we had been slighted so much through the course of our service. Mm-hmm. And I heard from the White House, and they said there's no national holidays. I didn't realize they're called federal holidays. And I didn't think that was the end of it. I didn't write anymore, but throughout President Bush's presidency, I received correspondence from him throughout his whole time, to include a 1992 Christmas card and a personal note from the president after his election loss.
Wow.
And then in 1990, I heard from a Trish Kenny, who was putting on a play. I guess he was a military brat at that time, called Home of the Brave. And that was the first time I ever wrote anything about my experience in Vietnam and sent my writings as contribution to the play. And I believe some years later that Trish worked for Huffington Post. I'm not sure about that.
Mm-hmm.
then I started doing reunions in Las Vegas from 1993 to 2010 to try and locate the men I served with and find these families of those who had been killed in a battle. I used to hate doing these reunions at times, but the guys loved it so much, and I found these families that would come and speak to us about what happened and wanting to know because nobody told them. The government covered all that up, and I didn't know about that till sometime around 2003 when I heard from David Moranis. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He was writing a book then called They Marched into Sunlight that featured the battle, and that became a huge bestseller that Tom Hanks bought the rights to make it in a movie, but it never happened. So that was a great book.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last person I heard from was from Ravi Kenner, an award-winning filmmaker who was doing a documentary based on David's book called 2 Days in October that came out around October 2005 on PBS, to rave reviews. It won a Peabody Award and an Emmy. And the thing that really got to me was when Robbie interviewed me and put me on the documentary. I guess his people, management, told Robbie that they wanted to delete my interview. And he told them, if you try to do that, he would not produce the documentary, and I didn't really know who Robbie was till I looked him up. I mean, he's a big-time producer, and I was really, pretty honored by that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of got me going and, thinking I could actually do some writing, and putting thoughts together is not so easy.
Fred, thank you very much for this. People, if it hasn't already been established, this is something that has touched so many people. I mean, it's a necessity for so many reasons. For those who have been to war, this is going to give them, hopefully some closure, and be able to process what they've been through. But also for those that have not, I'm telling you, this is something huge because it's going to give you direct insight into what they're going through, what they have gone through. My goodness. Go ahead.
There's people now that after this battle occurred in 1967 that are still, they're just so emotional about it.
Yeah,
some of them can't even talk about it to this day. And so I can imagine other people that have PTSD, not from war, but all the other reasons, like, maybe they were molested or whatever, and their stories are deeply personal, but I want them to know that, look, you need to talk about this. This is how it's going to help you, and if you need help, I'm happy to help anyone that needs some help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think this is what makes you and this book so important, Fred. People, again, it's Amazon, it's Barnes & Noble, it's whydidn'tidie.com. Head on over there today, pick up your copies, because this is something that is eye-opening. Fred, I'm curious with this next one, man. I believe it's something that it's safe to assume, but you know what? First and foremost, you know what happens when you assume, right? So I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
But also, I want to hear it from you because I think this gets to a heart of something that is truly profound. The title of your book, Why Didn't I Die? Man, there is a rabbit hole we can dive down with regards to that, in a lot of different ways that this can go. But I'm curious to hear it from you first. Out of all of the titles you could have chosen to be representation for your book, why did you choose that one?
Well, I I originally, my publisher wanted to call it "Why Didn't I Die?" with a question mark. I said, look, this is not a question. This is a statement. That's what I was making is basically I was saying if I would have died, the outcome could have been different. And I sort of allude to it a little bit in my book, but I don't want to really talk about that too much because it'll sound like I'm bragging a bit, but that's not my intent whatsoever.
Well, thank you very much for that. I definitely would not have taken it as bragging. I mean, again, when I first read that title, now I will say, I read it with the question mark, right? Even though the question mark is not represented, I read it that way. And what first came to my mind was maybe a sense of guilt that you felt that you had lived and others had not. And I think that is something. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. The guilt is huge for me, and it's been a huge problem for me because many of my friends were killed that day, and it just shocked me to no end because I never expected anything like this.
And that's one of those things that, again, unless you know someone in the military, or unless you yourself have been in the military and have fought in wars, that is a very common feeling that a lot of soldiers, ex-military representatives, come back feeling. Why were they the ones that were saved? And so many of their brothers had fallen. And there is an immense sense of guilt that they feel with regards to that, where the everyday person, like myself, like others who have not experienced that, we look at it from a different perspective in terms of, you should feel proud. You should be grateful, right? That you survived such a terrible experience. And that is not the way it is perceived so often, right? A lot of times, as I mentioned, ex-military representatives, they don't look at it as a badge of honor that they wear. They look at it as it almost would have been easier had they not survived. And that, I think, gets to a heart of something that, again, we're not going to go into great detail within this conversation, but that, I think, is another big piece to why your book, Fred, is so important, because the conversation that can ensue through just reading your title, my goodness, because that's very much a part of all of this. Fred.
Well, I just one more thing.
Yeah, please.
One of the reasons why, in addition to just what you talked about, like most soldiers that come back are very guilty, and they're not saying, well, gee, I'm glad he died instead of me. No, we don't think that way.
But of course.
One of the reasons why is that I got we were given one R&R usually a year. It was like a vacation for a week. But it just so happened that I had gotten this second R&R in October, and I already had one in June. I wasn't supposed to get it, and I left the field on the 14th of October, and I'm reading about this battle in Japan and not realizing what it was my unit.
Wow. This is incredible stuff here. Fred, my follow-up question that I want to go into, you've already started to go into different experiences you've had over the past few decades and why this was something that you felt needed to be written and put out in certain inspirational conversations and people that you had met along the way. Well, I'm curious, throughout this entire process of you writing this book and bringing it to fruition, what would you say was something that surprised you, that you weren't anticipating before you began?
I never thought I could write a book. I mean, when I was in college, I was very good at doing research papers. Like I was maybe, get A+ on them. Mm-hmm. But when I started trying to write this book, I was finding it difficult and frustrating trying to put thoughts on paper that could be a good story. I went through many, many rewrites. I sought help from professional writers trying to improve my writing, and then I found out I'm not writing a story, but a boring research project. And once I cleared my mind of that, then things developed. And I'm so envious of great writers that can capture someone's attention, which is so very difficult.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Listen, the writing process is one that, like anything else, it takes practice, it takes time, it takes dedication to sharpen those tools, to perfect it. People, listen, I could sit here and I can talk to Fred for hours. This book is something magnificent that has so much to offer. You know where you gotta go. I'm going to say it for you again. It's Amazon. It's Barnes & Noble. It's whydidn'tidie.com. Head on over there today. Pick up copies of Why Didn't I Die? A Memoir of PTSD. While you're at it, get it as a gift for someone else, because this book is so much larger than a literary creation. At its foundation, that's what it is. But this book is an education. This book is going to give you insight on something that, listen, if it were up to me, we would never have another war for the rest of humanity. Unfortunately, we know that's not the case. So this is going to allow you to have a greater insight on what war truly is like. And a lot of the outcomes and the effects of war long after the battlefield. The book is under his pen name, F.W. Kirkpatrick. While you're at it, check out his other book, My Great Great Aunts. Be on the lookout for that one. As I mentioned, it's not available for purchase just yet, but it will be very soon. Get on board with these books. Fred, this has been a true pleasure. Man, I really do mean this, an absolute honor. Thank you very much for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction.
Well, thank you, Mr. Cole. I really appreciate you doing this interview. I thought it was fantastic. You're just a great interviewer.